So, welcome to the panel, Why You Should Invest in Women-Led Businesses. My name is Cass Walker. I'm Executive Director at First Southwest Community Fund, and I'm thrilled to be moderating this panel for three incredible female entrepreneur and investors. This panel is co-hosted by First Southwest Community Fund, the Impact Finance Center, and Colorado Lending Source. And before we dive in and hear from our panelists, I wanted to just give a very small bit of context. So, why should you invest in women-led businesses? The short answer, which we'll hear from our panelists, is that it's because it's a good investment. And I just wanted to frame the conversation with a couple of statistics that not everyone may know. So despite the fact that less than 2% of venture capital and 30% of small business loans go to women-led businesses, Black women and Hispanic women-owned businesses are some of the fastest growing in our nation. One statistic I think is really interesting, and especially given our current climate, this is always an important conversation, but we're in the middle of a pandemic. And if we look back to the last recession, between 2007 and 2011, businesses that were owned by women and people of color added 1.8 million jobs, while businesses that were owned by white men lost 800,000 jobs. And this was despite the fact that women and founders of color faced more closures than any other groups in the last recession. So like I said, this is an important topic always, but right now we're seeing women-led and founders of color being disproportionately affected by COVID and the shutdowns and having less access to capital. So while this is a continuing conversation, right now, it's even more important to talk about why we're investing in women-led businesses. So we're going to run through here from our amazing panelists. We'll try and leave a little bit of time at the end for some questions from the audience. But I know we've got a lot to talk about. Our prep call went for 30 minutes and we only have an hour. So we will get started. So to kick off, I'm going to have each of our entrepreneurs introduce themselves and share the story of their businesses and how they approached raising capital. So Diane, why don't we kick off with you?
Okay, so my name is Diane Miles and I own Dope Mom Life. We are a creative content agency and our form is video. So we specialize in video production, ambassador video marketing, and outreach and relationship building. So our goal is to help organizations that have a diversity initiative, resource, service, opportunity, connect and engage with communities of color and Black people. We have a DE&I lens, so everything we do is through that lens. So the company has to be doing the internal work so we can help them do the external work. Really, when I started Dope Mom Life, like it was me really pulling myself up by my bootstraps, as they like to say, and just making it happen for my company and for myself. Now we're in a space where I feel more comfortable after being in business for 2 years accessing capital. So we're finally taking on loans and looking at investors. But I was afraid, and it was a mindset shift that I really had to have, especially during COVID, and seeing the growth potential. So yeah, it's been long going. And I'm also a community investment manager for a foundation called AJL. So I'm on both sides of the spectrum and kind of can speak to both of those experiences.
Awesome. Thank you, Diane. We're so excited to have you, as you said, with both of those hats on. So next up, Dee, why don't we hear a little bit about your story?
So I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've been in some sort of business since 1996. My current business I've had for 10 years. When I started this business, I had another business fall with B Lending. When B Lending fell, I was in real estate investing. So when I started this business, I had zero credit, zero capital, and I basically bootstrapped it. So in the beginning of, I do environmental consulting. So we have about 40 just under 40 employees right now, and we're doing about $2.5 million a year. So when I started the business, like I said, we bootstrapped it. So it was credit cards, it was family members, it was pulling people in to do the work in the business. And that lasted for, a good 3 years or so until I was able to hire my first employee at 4 years. And I acquired some SBA certifications that allowed me to just access the government side of contracting a lot more easily. And with that, we've seen exponential growth. And with that growth, we've had various capital needs. So when I first started my business, so we had bootstrapping and getting money from wherever I could get money, doing a project so I could do another project, and kind of working that way. And then I acquired a business partner about 5 or 6 years into business. And that lasted about a year. And I was using his line of credit because I still couldn't qualify for a line of credit. I still had very bad credit. I had a situation where in about year 3, I went to my local bank and tried to get funding for $1,100, a signature loan, and I couldn't get it. I was denied. Even though I had a house and vehicles and all sorts of assets and income coming in, I was still denied a loan for $1,100. That was about year 3. So I got rid of that business partner when I started partnering with First Southwest Bank. And they've just been phenomenal. So we started out with a $50,000 loan to get rid of my business partner. And so that I left a hole open for a line of credit. Then they helped me with an SBA-backed 7A line of credit. And then I needed another, I kept growing, needed more space, had 2 buildings. I needed a 3rd building. So First Southwest came in and wrote me a mortgage. And from there, it's been gradually larger and larger access to capital. I went from a $150,000 line of credit to a $300,000 line of credit. So I just got a letter about 2 weeks ago that said they would extend my credit up to $600,000 for my line of credit. So going from an absolutely where a local bank would not fund me $1,100, I have, First Southwest Bank is committing to over, darn near $1 million worth of investment in my company is what they're willing to commit between the various products I have with them. So, and the difference is just been kind of amazing, but that's kind of the story of my lending history and where our business has gone.
Thank you, Dean. We're excited to hear more about your growth of your company in the next few bits. Norma, let's have you introduce yourself. What's your business, and tell us a little bit about your story.
Hi, my name is Norma, and my business is Sweet Gold Juice Company. It's an all-organic cold pressed juice business that serves the Denver metro area, mostly through farmers markets and home delivery. And very similarly to the previous panelists, I had a lot of enthusiasm and a lot of passion to start this business, but the capital wasn't quite there. And the trust on behalf of lenders was also not there. So I also did some bootstrapping, both with some little cash that I had saved up, credit cards, family members, and eventually, I would say, like, more than anything, it's been such a learning experience in the fact that you just like build on each little step, that it wasn't, just like, walking into a bank and getting exactly the amount that you wanted to fund your exact vision of what you wanted it to be. So I started off with having, my most significant loan was one that my mom took out on my behalf. And through that, I did the best I could. I had initially been denied a loan that I had applied for, and I had put so much enthusiasm into it. So I started wondering, like, should I be doing this to begin with? And I'm really glad that I had those missteps of being told no, because I think that in some ways you start feeling your way better than had you been told yes, really. It's just an affirmation in each and every single step. And then ultimately, after my first year of funding it myself, I returned to a lender. It was Colorado Lending Source. And I had showed them what I had done with the small amount of capital that I had started off with. And then at that point, I was able to get my second round of funding to grow my business to the point that it is now, which I now have employees, and I'm growing it beyond just a seasonal model.
That's awesome. Thank you to all three of you for sharing a little bit about your stories. And I think, all of those pieces makes it even more incredible to see the robust and strong businesses that you all have that are going from strength to strength. So I'm really excited to hear more as we go through. So when we did our prep call, our discussion kind of fell into two camps. What are the challenges women and women of color specifically face when they're, raising investment or looking for funding? And then what are the opportunities? So we're going to talk a little bit about the challenges first. I'm not sure everyone is always aware of some of the nuances that women and women of color face when they are looking for investment. So we're going to kick off with that. So first question, what are the challenges that you have all encountered? And, you've alluded to some of them. And what are the challenges you think that women, especially women of color, encounter when raising funding for their businesses? So who wants to kick us off? We're going to do this discussion style.
I guess I'll go ahead. I know we're not a shy group. So I think there's a couple of different things. I think first, starting with mindset, I think when we're talking about women in general, and then when we segment that into women of color and Black women, there are these mindsets that we kind of have and have historically been put on us that stop us from even wanting to access capital. And then, of course, you have the second layer of that when you go to access capital and the experience is traumatizing. Not that I didn't try to access capital the first time around, I did. And the experience with the CDFI that I went through was very unpleasant. And the lady that was engaging with me ended up telling me like she just had a loan that she had to default on and had to try to collect the people's stuff, or they filed bankruptcy or something or other. And that happens a lot of times, right? Like your biases come into play. With these lenders, it may have been a Black woman that defaulted on her loan, and so then here comes this Black woman looking for capital, and now I get the energy from the lady that defaulted on their loan. And so I remember having to have a couple of tough conversations. So I think it's two layers to what stops us from accessing capital. First being that just mindset and like, should I do this? That fear, because I know what that's like. I'm still working through that as I'm growing my business. And then two, like just the experience of dealing with lenders.
I think it's really salient when you start looking at mindset, and how we're raised in relationship to money. It's, coming from a Hispanic background, we don't talk about money except that, we need more of it, or something's going to cost something. But our parents didn't really, talk to us about how you raise capital. Even using capital or using credit was just not something you did. You might have had a mortgage on your house or maybe a car loan, but anything other than that, you just either used what you had or made do with what you had or went without, and that was really that whole idea of leveraging just it's not part of the conversations that are happening. And I didn't even realize this until I went to Stanford for my undergrad, Stanford University, and all these affluent, Anglo people, and their parents talked to them about it. They talked to them about startup. They talked to them about entrepreneurism. They talked to them about how you get a commercial loan. And these were conversations that, around the dinner table kind of conversations where we didn't have that growing up. And if I knew anybody that had a business, they had their own, house cleaning business, or, had the local place down the street, that they had their own restaurant, but they didn't have a chain of restaurants. They didn't have, a business that was working international, even though we were on the border. It just wasn't part of the mindset of our background growing up. And so all of this you have to learn. It doesn't fall from the tree. Your parents aren't teaching you. So there's like step-by-step incremental learning process that has to go on. And on top of it, when all your role models don't look like you, whether they're not your gender or not your color or not your whatever, those aren't the people that, having access to other minorities that are running businesses or other women that are running businesses is just not, it's just hard. You got to reach pretty far out in your network, to find those people that not only you can trust, but that are, that you can relate to, or that can relate to you and relate to what you're trying to do with your business. And I know both Diane and Norma can talk about, that aspect of it, finding people that understand what a woman's trying to do with their business rather than what, your typical, I'm going to say it, just our typical Anglo male who's running a business. The model looks different. And I know these gals can address that, but I really think that mindset's really important, and access to capital and fearfulness and access to capital. My business before this one, it fell. It went belly up, took my house, took everything. I lost everything except my vehicle and my furniture. I lost everything else. And that was a big lesson in relation to debt and what I could do with debt. And so I'm very careful in what debt I can acquire. So when I was discriminated against for that very small loan from a local bank, the bank manager and the assistant manager were both Anglo and of a different religious bent than I am. And we were flat out, ridiculously denied for a very small loan. And I think they expect us not to talk about it, right? Be ashamed of it, don't talk about it. And then you don't, and then they keep doing it, basically, and it's just kind of us or them. And it was really just amazing discrimination that was so blatant. And those kind of things reinforce your ideas towards money and towards debt. And I think that's important that we, like as Diane brought up, that we look at our relationship with money and debt.
For me, not having that reflection, that constant reflection in society, like you said, Dee, of role models that look like me, of just like that reflection of the affirmation that you can do this. It's almost like you have to look straight like ahead in the mirror, but you also have to ignore the mirror. It's kind of like such a weird relationship that you have to construct your own reflection. And one thing that you didn't lose, Dee, was the belief that you can carry on, that there was no like final end as to what you can do with yourself and your ideas. Because that's something that, for I think the patriarchal, like male Anglo, it's something that you dust off and you move on. As it, like for women, it seems like it falls more like, oh yes, you probably shouldn't have been doing this to begin with, like find a different path. And for me, that's something that's been such a not only just in business, but in terms of personal growth, to continue to weave my own understanding of myself and how I fit into the bigger picture. And every day I feel more and more confident in saying to myself that I am laying my own tracks, because that's something that, Anglo males have infinitesimally, behind them and in front of them are these tracks that they can just like, set their train on and they're good to go. And for us, there's so much more work involved, but I think that that's what makes it so exciting, both for ourselves or for people that are thinking of investing in us.
Thank you. And thank you all for, being candid and sharing your stories. I think it, as Dee mentioned, a lot of our society is set up for women and women of color to not talk about these things. And I think it is incredibly important that we do, especially when we're trying to inspire the next generation of entrepreneurs. One, before we move on, and actually this is a good segue into opportunities, one phrase that came up in our prep call, which I loved, was women of color are unicorns. And Norma, building off a little bit what you were just talking about, that came up in a number of different contexts when we were talking. Can you kind of expand on that, especially what you were kind of talking about the reflection and representation side of things?
There are few and far between in comparison to what the entrepreneurial world looks like as far as women and women of color, especially. So, you know, piggybacking on what we mentioned yesterday. So you are up against being this very unique player in the game, but you also at the same time have to connect more than anyone else. So it's just this, it's almost like you have to exist on polar opposites at the same time in order to thrive, if that makes sense. Like you have to connect more than anyone, but at the same time, you have to celebrate your uniqueness. And I think that that's, again, something that makes that particular person so interesting as far as their entrepreneurial journey, because there's more spectrum. There's more facets that they need to touch base with in order to succeed.
Diane, what are your thoughts when we were talking about that?
Yeah, I think it's just when we look at the grand scheme of things and we look at businesses and entrepreneurship in that world, the cookie cutter stereotype of that is a white male, right? It's when we look at companies that dominate industries, right? As a Black woman who owns a video production company, that says it all right there. Like they look at me like, you don't know how to make a video. Yes, I do. Yes, I do. And so in that context, I'm a unicorn. I come in and they're like, this is the director, producer. She put this all together. She knows how to do this. You can shoot, you can write, you can produce this. And so I think it's as we're spearheading these industries and we're breaking ground in new entrepreneurship pathways, like we're unicorns because you've never seen anybody that continues to thrive with everything that's thrown at us, right? There's this beautiful meme online and it has like a starting block for a white man and it's like just a clear path. He's just a clear path. You just go. When we hit go, you just run. But they say like all of our experiences are the same and everybody's on an equal playing ground. And then you look at the women and you look at our starting blocks and there's like chains and a mountain and a knife and some other stuff. And we have all these obstacles and hurdles and everything else that we have to overcome. Well, and then like as soon as we got off the block, there was a hurdle. So it's like there was a hurdle at the starting block for us. And so I think anytime we continue to press forward, we're of course going to be that beautiful unicorn that they're like, well, how did she make it? And why is she still here? So that's kind of my take on what that means.
Man, I think that why is she still here? That totally resonates. It's like when you do federal contracting and you're at an architectural and engineering conference and you walk into a presentation and you're one of like, 3 women in a group of like 75. And of those 3 women, you're the only business owner. It's a trip, and you either have to, be shy and never get any business, or realize people are going to look at you because they think you just grew horn, and you might as well take that center stage and use it to your advantage, because just walking into a room, you get attention. And it's not always, Madonna principle, the attention you want. It's not always good attention, but you do get attention when you walk in that door. So how you use that and how you change that dialogue, to being in your favor is really important, and you can watch it, the discrimination. I've had booths where I was marketing with a company and they had work for us and they didn't want to talk to me. It made it quite clear by only talking to me about the weather and then going to one of my workers and one of my managers and talking to him about work. It's pretty clear, don't want to talk to a woman. But for my sense, I'm like, I'll take the contract. I don't care. I'll take the work because that work keeps my people employed. So it's kind of like, there's this cost benefit to, you are in the spotlight and you are totally different. So how are you going to work it? So you've just been given a gift of like, you're the strange one in the room. So let's do something with it, right? Because you can either be cowed by it or embrace it and manipulate it back. Their manipulate it back to your advantage. And that's way, way powerful, I think.
Thank you, Dee. And it's interesting, before this panel, I actually was coaching a couple of young women who I've known for a long time, who are women of color, and they have been given some negative feedback recently about how they interact and have been told to change. And it really was resonating what you all are saying about, how you build on your strengths and what the strengths are of women-led businesses. And you don't change for anyone that tells you that you shouldn't behave in that way in the world. So it's interesting to hear you all talk about this, as I was just having this conversation with a couple of younger entrepreneurs that I know.
So it's hilarious. I will wear bright red dresses to these events. Bright pink, bright red, and I figure I'm going to stick out either way. I might as well be able to see me from across the darn room.
So building on that, we've heard some about the challenges and the barriers, and I think a lot of what you're saying, some folks have probably never even thought about before. So I really appreciate, as I said, you all being candid about your experiences. Moving into the opportunities, and we have, as we mentioned, the pleasure of having both entrepreneurs and Diane, who's on the investor side as well. So as we think about, why should people think about intentionally investing in women-led businesses? And what sets women-led businesses apart, especially those led by women of color? We've heard a little bit about that from you all already. But Diane, maybe you can start us off, both from the investor side and the entrepreneur side. What do you look for in a business that you're investing in, and why do you think it's important to invest in women-led businesses?
Yeah, so I think as an investor, first of all, I'm an investor for a foundation, which makes it a little bit different, right? Because it has to, and for our foundation, it has to be mission aligned with what we do and how we serve. We're 100% mission driven. But then I think we look at impact. So what impact do you have in the community that you serve? And as women, I think traditionally we all start businesses because of a need. There's a need, and that's why we start a business. We see a gap and we're like, I know how to fill that gap. I think all of us, when we look at our why and why we started a business, it always comes back to that why. There's something else there. Like I didn't just start a video production company because I just love video production. While I do, there was a why behind it, which is why my company is named Dope Mom Life. And the story is what really drives my business. And so women, I think, are prime position as the diversity that we speak of when we're talking about that thought diversity, diversity and leadership skills, just all of the ways that make women different and make people want to come work for us. It was interesting, like this week, I've had a lot of life happen to me in the past 7 days. So much has happened. And I still was expected to show up. I know it's my company. I have to show up. I still have to perform. But I think we get so like, that's not real life. Like we're in a pandemic, first of all. And then like all of the stuff that happened in my life, there's no way to separate the two. There's going to be some stuff because real life has happened. And I think as women are starting organizations that have been traditionally male dominated, or just becoming entrepreneurs in a way that's been in an entrepreneurship world that's been male dominated, and those standards were set that work life, you leave that at the door, home life, you leave that at the door when you walk into work, and that's not real. They had wives taking care of kids and whatever. They could be like, forget them people, I'll deal with them when I get there. And that's not the real world. So as women are coming into the workforce, we're changing those narratives.
what do you need? You need some time off. Like, do not be afraid to be human. And so I think that positions us beautifully to recreate these systems that have been white male dominated in a way that they need to be changed, because it doesn't work how it worked before. And then investor, I say right now, social justice is huge. So if you have a social lens that you're looking through, and I hate to like DE&I, diversity, equity, and inclusion, this piece on it, and if you have that lens that your organization is looking through, people want to hear from you, and investors are starting to be less rigid because they understand the funding has only been going to white men. So they're starting to try to see how else can we work other people in so we don't look like those people. So I think this is a perfect time to start looking at investors and look at and for investors.
Thank you. It's super helpful to hear your kind of unique perspective on this. Norma and Dee, you know, coming at it very much from the entrepreneur side, why do you think that organizations and businesses led by women, specifically women of color, are a good investment? Norma, let's start with you.
Because we face so many challenges, I think it is a very unique position that a woman can probably connect to every like piece of the spectrum in her business, like most especially with her employees. Like, you understand what it's like to be vulnerable. Like, you understand not just in a business setting, but out in the world. So having, again, like that unique perspective of being a unicorn, being super strong, being, you know, something that people think isn't real, like a woman leader that can be successful, that doesn't exist. So still believing in yourself, but also having the experience of hardship. I think that just creates such a more colorful approach to leadership, because you know the vulnerability side, you know being confident, and the strength side. And I think that definitely reverberates out into the energy of the culture of your business. It reverberates out to your employees, because it's not just like a monochromatic, like, oh, I kind of just had, again, the reflection that I could do this my entire life. So I think that makes for a much richer culture and a more expansive journey in terms of like, you're laying down your own track, so you have no ceiling of what you expect you can accomplish. You're just kind of just going for it. And I think that investing in a person, in a situation where it's just building on that passion, not building on a thought, not building on limits, is really exciting.
That's awesome. Dee, what about you?
Totally different direction. Okay. No touchy feely. This is straight economics. In the 1990s, you could go and get tripe at the store for like $1.50 a pound, right? It's one of the staples of Menudo, one of the, you know, very ethnic food. Now it's like $5, $6, $7, $8 a pound. I watched in the mid 90s, the price of Hispanic foods, oxtails, you know, for example, just triple in price. Things they used to give away are now, you know, kidneys, you know, they've gone like tripled in price. Why is that? So in an economic standpoint, mindset, they realized that one of the largest segments of the growing population was the Hispanic population, especially in the West and the Southwest. And they started marketing to Hispanics, and they started having products that were specifically for our tastes, and realizing that we were starting to, as a group, we're starting to have a disposable income, or income that we would spend on traditional foods, because they reminded us of family, of home, and the whole food component being such an important piece of culture. So in the same way, women-owned minority businesses, we have different networks. We're a different segment. We will more likely reach out to people that were of other women or other people in color to do business with. So in that sense, we are one of the largest growing demographics of business ownership, is not only minorities, but women. And just from an economic standpoint, it only makes sense because we tap a different network. And that network is, like I said, untapped. And so the ability to tap a new network of people within a population of people that they thought they were servicing, but really weren't servicing.
That's awesome. And yeah, I love the different perspectives on this. I think there's so many ways we can think about it. And it's good to have the touchy-feely and the economic side, because I think both are, super valid and really important to understand. We keep going back to people, which doesn't surprise me. But I think, one of the things we talked about yesterday was, how does building a team come into this, right? Like, when you're thinking about raising capital, who's on your team, who's important to have on your team, and how does that play out? And Dee, let's go back to you and start with you on this one.
I have a really strange perspective for this that most people probably don't have. That I see my bank as part of my team. They are like an offshoot of my company, so that I think about their resources as my resources. It's kind of funny. A lot of times we're thought to think about, we need to look at this dialogue that we have with money and about banking institutions. So usually, it's the bank, it's up there, somewhere up there in the big solid building, with the steeple and the little clock on it. And you know what I mean? That idea of what a bank looks like, or the big skyscraper, in thinking about, well, what's a bank's function? So a bank's function is to lend money. They have to lend money. I mean, that's how else do they keep their stuff moving other than taking your money that you put in your bank and selling it to somebody else so that they can make money to support their operations. That's how banks operate. They need to be able to lend to you. So it's not us on bended knee asking for funding. It's how can we partner with them, with our team member who is our bank. And part of that is creating that, go back to people, like Cass said, relationship. Building that relationship, not only, with words, dialogue, but also with providing financial statements, budgets, transparency in your bank, in your books, in your accounting procedures, so that I can go to my banker, which is what I did like 2 weeks ago, just talked about it. And I said, well, I need to double my line of credit. And they're like, oh yeah, that's cool. We can do that. I didn't have to provide a single piece of paperwork to First Southwest Bank to have them give me an offer letter to double my line of credit. So that's because they have my paperwork, they have my taxes, they have there's total transparency because they're a team member. If I want them to be able to react and respond to me quickly, I need to give them what they need so that they understand what I'm doing as a business, so that they can make those decisions on how we're doing. And when the bank president, Jenny, calls me and says, I want to sit down when this is over because I want to understand your business more. I mean, that's the kind of response you get from a relationship building, and not just we're going out for coffee, but the insides and outsides of my business and see my books. And that's a very different perspective as the bank being out there somewhere, or the bank being right here on your team, sitting next to you as you're going through this process.
I love that. And Diane, I think it'll be interesting to hear from you on this. So 2 questions for you. When you've got your investor hat on, do you see yourself as kind of joining the team when you're investing in someone? And then on your entrepreneur side, how is building your team played in to growing your business?
Yeah, so we 100% as an investor believe we are a partner. And so one of the things we pride ourselves on, especially the fact that we work with organizations that have traditionally been underfunded or unfunded and have been grassroots organizations, we become a partner. So we're not just investing in you, we're looking for other people to invest in you. How can we make our relationship better? So we, in everything I do in life, I believe in co-collaborating, so co-creating. So my business my personal life, I believe you have to co-create in order to make beautiful things, right? Like that's why I have two beautiful children, because I co-created these amazing humans into this world. So 100% believe in being a partner to whoever we invest in. And I think all organizations should look for investors or lenders that are going to be your partners. They're going to help you access more capital or build other relationships. Like those are the people you want to work with as a business owner. That's one of the main things I'm looking for in my investor. Like, how can you help me grow? Like, okay, your money is great. I'm going to make money because I've been figuring that out for a very long time. I've been a mom since I was 16. Trust, I know how to make something pop. But how can you help me scale my business to the next level, right? And then as far as people, I remember like the first couple of months after I started my company, I was so proud that I could write, shoot, produce, edit. I did everything. I could do all of it. And that, like I said, that was a couple of months. And I was like, I don't want to do none of this. Well, I want to do some of it, but I don't want to do majority of this stuff. And so early on, I was in school for video production and editing. So when I started the Mommy Blog, there was some people in my class that were really good at certain things. And I was like, hey, I like had a little meeting. I didn't even know I was an entrepreneur yet. This was my first go at it. And I had a little meeting in another classroom. And I was like, yo, so I have this idea. I was wondering if you would want to be my editor. And it was this guy, Daniel, who is still my editor to this day. Now he's on the team. Well, he's been on the team. And this young girl, Alyssa, I was like, yo, and then I think you're an amazing shooter. How do you feel about this? And they both were like, Diane, we love your vision. Here we are. And that was my first experience with find people that are smarter, better than you. I like to say I'm on my Barack Obama wave. And so I make sure I have a strong team around me that can do all the things that I'm not good at. I learn everything, so I understand how everything works. So I know how to write, produce, shoot, edit. So if anything falls through the cracks, I can make sure I'm on top of it, but I don't have to because I have a solid team. And then it goes back to how I treat them. I let them, they're humans, and I make sure I pay my people well. Like, I make sure I pay you well. I don't want you out here struggling and stressed out. Let's at least eliminate that one little piece if I can do that. And so my people are willing to work for me, and I honor and respect them as humans first before anything else. And so my people will go above and beyond for me in ways I can't even begin to explain. So I have built a team from the beginning, because we wouldn't be where we're at if I didn't have my teammates. Like, they're just as much a part of Dope Mom life and the foundation of the company as I am.
Thank you. And, Norma, same question to you, but I want to pick up on something. I think it was you that said yesterday that teams led by women of color have a special kind of energy. Expand on that a little bit and tell us about how building a team has really played into the growth of your business.
Building a team has been both like a serious learning journey for myself, because I am an only child. So I have this tendency to like say, I can do this all on my own. And especially again, being like a very almost like stubborn, very goal-oriented woman, I, for a good while, felt like I am going to do this on my own. And that's something that I've really learned, that there is no doing on your own, that having these networks, having partnership, all these things are so important. That has been such a like valuable lesson for me. Both, like Dee was saying, in my relationship with Colorado Lending Source, they are now people that I go to share my success with. And it feels amazing that I have, this group of people that are cheering me on, and it almost feels like a family. And it's especially nice because I'm originally from New York. So it just feels like I'm building a family here in Denver through my business. And it's been absolutely beautiful. And as far as like my team itself, it has a different energy, because I can tell that my team feels like they're making a social impact in working with me. That it's not just, a job that they go and they collect a paycheck. They feel like they're really pushing again, like given the social climate, they're pushing an agenda, a philosophy that they believe in working with me. And that I think really like just energizes all of us. Like we just like feed off of each other, because when I feel that in them, I believe more in myself, and then I can give them more. And it's just like, it's been such a beautiful journey, most especially like I would say in the past like 2 months, I've felt that more than ever. And it's really given me so much more confidence in believing in what this business can be beyond what it is right now.
Can I just throw something out there? There's this African proverb that says, if you want to go far, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I believe that that speaks for everything. And it takes a village, right? To raise children, to do anything, it takes a village. So I just want to throw that one out.
I love that. And I think it's a really interesting concept to think about, you know, how our investors in any portion, right? Whether they're venture capital, lenders, or whatever form, whether they're friends and family that are investing in your business, how are they part of your team? And I think that should be one really big takeaway for both entrepreneurs and investors from this session. You know, what are you bringing to that team? As investors, what are you bringing, and how are you going to help these people succeed? And if you're an entrepreneur, what are you looking for on your team? As Diane said, you all know how to make money. And whilst when we look at the statistics, it can be daunting about how many folks are investing in women and women of color-led businesses. But people are lucky to invest in your businesses. And it's important, I think, for everyone to remember that. If we have any questions from the audience, feel free to put them in the chat. And while that happens, if we have folks that are thinking about things they'd like to know from one of our panelists, I'll ask one more question, because I think there was one point we touched on yesterday that hasn't come up yet. And that's the fear, or how do you know how much?
I think we lost Cass.
How much should you ask for? And how does fear play into that?
Let me hit that one real quick. I would love to. And I'm just going to jump in because Cass is breaking in and out. Everybody needs financial education. Everybody needs it. And entrepreneurs need it even more than most people. So get your financial education. Know what a balance sheet means. Know what your financial statements are supposed to look like. Know your ratios, so that when you go into a lending institution, you can talk apples and apples. You're not talking apples and oranges. I think that's one of the really, really, truly important takeaways that people need, that you have to do that on your own. That's your job as an entrepreneur. It's not only know your business, but to know those books and to understand what they mean. And then you can have a discussion about growth and about, you know, where your finances are. And it makes everything so much easier when you can talk bank with bankers.
And I will just add, start challenging and working through the traumas of our childhood and our relationships with money, because that's going to be huge when we're talking about going to an investor or a bank and asking for $150,000. There's a lot of trauma that we don't even understand that comes into play, and like this scarcity mindset that we really have to shift. And it's, like Dee said, based on our conversations growing up in our homes and the lack of conversations we were having around money, and the scarcity talk that was happening when we were talking about money. Like, Mom, I want this, I don't got money. Like, okay, well, sheesh. So I definitely think like we have to start healing those traumas in our relationships to and with money.
Norma, anything you would add on that?
I'm personally still walking this journey, but I think that healing, you know, our conditioning around money, I think is really big. And I think also believe like separating what your relationship has been with money and knowing that your business, it's in its own entity in some ways. So not, believing that exactly what you've experienced with money is what your business will experience with money. Like in some degree, like I think having some separation there for me has been helpful.
Awesome. And we did have a question come in from one of our audience members. And the question is, where do you all see yourselves in 7 years? Very specific. So I'm excited to hear. You've all grown amazing companies. You've all been in business for a different number of years, but where do you each see yourself in 7 years' time? Who wants to kick us off?
I'd like to see myself in a place where I have my head less down into the ground in what I'm doing and more in an expansive way of how to grow what already is. And, as Dee said earlier, not just feeling like I can just like, oh, I can singularly do this business in one way, like, oh, owning like a local restaurant, like, no, like what else can I do with this? Like how big can it grow? And I think just growing both my belief in myself and having that be reflected in how the business grows, I think is really big for me.
Dee, why don't we hear from you next?
So I still do a lot of billable work within my company. So I'd like to not be doing so much billable work within my company. Like Diane said, I can do all the pieces and parts, but it doesn't mean I should be doing all the pieces and parts. And it's been a process to pull away from doing billable work to doing the non-billable work that I need to be able to grow and scale my company. And that's part of it. We are in a program, a certification program that ends in 2 years. So right now I'm more thinking about my exit from that than what we're doing immediately after that than what we're doing, 5 years after that point. So we're still in a period of growth, and I'd like to keep that and just grow our foundation a bit more, so that I don't have to be in the nuts and bolts of the business, every day of the week, and have more managers in place. And to do that, I need to expand more. And I think we'll probably be there in a couple years. So that's where I'm going.
And then for me, and I think there's somebody raising their hand too. So really quick, 7 years we'll be doing international content creation videos and creating these amazing experiences for people. I'm excited for where I see us going. So the content will be authentic, because that's all I believe in is authenticity. And we'll be doing it all over the world and not just here in Colorado.
Awesome. Thank you. I don't see the hand raised, so if someone does have a question.
Deborah, I think I seen her name.
Let's see. Deborah, did you have a question?
I did not raise my hand, but actually, you may have talked about this a little bit, but does anyone have any advice around what you found really successful with trying to market your service or product? And maybe if you've used social media a lot for that, or just any thoughts about that as a business?
Sorry. Was that it?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. I believe in relationships. My business would not be where I was at today if I did not have the relationships I have. So I believe in networking and building your social capital, right? Social capital will get you in places your resume will not, and you could have a stacked resume. I do leadership programs every year, and this is just what works for my business. But as examples, I do a leadership program every year because that builds my network even more. I'm a part of every marketing something or other I could be a part of. They're the ones who buy videos. So I make sure I'm on committees with marketing directors and communications directors. And again, that's just personally for my business. There was one other point I had. Yeah, network, build those relationships, make people fall in love with you. Because once you do that, they'll be there to have your back.
I'm telling you, relationship building is huge. You know, even though we do federal contracting, it's like, how do you learn how to do your elevator speech, and how do you do your pitch? And then how do you create relationships with people you don't know, right? So you have the introduction. So somebody introduced you to someone. So you've got that relationship, right? And so somebody, you come almost pre-qualified for a relationship with people. So how do you build on that from someone you don't know anything about, you don't know their background, you don't know nothing. They might look or be very different, not only personality wise, but ethnicity and gender. And how do you create relationship in those situations? Because ideally that relationship is what's going to get you work. So even though I'm in a federal contracting realm where we're bidding on projects, you know, when we got a contract 2 years ago for $750,000, it was because a short list of 5 firms was put in front of a client. And the client said, because these people came out and visited us last year. And we're in the middle of nowhere. And they came out and visited us last year, and nobody else on this list bothered to. So we want to give and so that bit of one travel trip ended up with a $750,000 project, a $500,000 project, another $500,000 project. So, you know, $2.25 million worth of work from one little visit and making that relationship work.
Norma, anything you would add on to that? No. Okay. Well, we're coming up on time, so I'm just going to ask our 3 panelists to leave us with one piece of parting advice. And I think we've talked a lot about what you can do as the entrepreneur. So I'd actually like to end on what investors should be thinking about. So I'm going to pose to you all the question that the panel is. If you could say one thing to investors listening right now, why should they invest in women-led businesses? Diane, you want to kick us off?
No, can somebody else? I got to think for a second.
Dee, go for it.
Okay, good, cool. So the relationship isn't one-sided. You have to realize that you have to bring something to the business, and they're going to bring something to you. That this goes both ways. So if the bank is only thinking about what the bank can do for the bank, then that person's going to go somewhere else. I'm bankable. I can go anywhere else, but I stay with my bank because of the service I get and the responsiveness I get and the products. They have incredible products, the products I get out of them. So what are you giving me, and what am I giving back to you in return? That it goes both ways.
I love that. Norma, are you ready? You look ready.
Super simple. I think that people are starting to vote with their dollar more and more, and people are excited to put their dollar towards women. Like, you know, even taking the touchy-feely out of it, just like, no, if your business says it's a woman-owned business, especially a woman of color, people are more likely these days to put their vote in that direction. So it's a win-win situation.
Thank you. Diane, what you got?
I would say always lead with your why, because the right people are going to come to you when you're leading with your why. The right investor is going to find you because that is going to capture their attention. I think people get caught up in like so many things with investors, and really it boils down to what's your why and can that person relate and connect to your why? Of course, the business has to make money, but one of the main things is, can they relate to your why? And then always know what your secret sauce is. What makes you different than anybody else that they can go invest in? Any other woman that is doing video or whatever, like, what is your secret sauce?
Well, thank you. It has been a total honor to facilitate this conversation, and I can't wait to see where all 3 of your businesses go. I'll be watching. So thank you very much, and I hope everyone who attended enjoyed. This will be, it was recorded